Hello, my name is Leonard, and this is the Symantec Enterprise Vault 10 for Exchange Administration course, Lesson 8, Managing Client Access with the Outlook Web Access or App Extensions. This is a continuation from our previous lesson where we were looking at the different clients that are available, and we first looked at the Outlook clients, and now we're going to move on to the Outlook Web Access or App. Now, for Outlook Web Access, that's the version of Outlook Web being able to connect for version 2007 and earlier, but in Exchange 2010, we changed that name to be Outlook Web App. So I'm going to say Outlook Web Access as we go through, unless we're specifically addressing the version that's for Exchange 2010, and then I will say the Outlook Web App. As we go through this lesson, we're going to be looking at how to, or basically look at how it functions for both the Outlook Web Access and App, for both the 2003, 2007 versions, as well as the 2010 version. We'll talk about installing our extensions. You do have to install something on the Exchange servers when we are using the Outlook Web Access to be able to get to Enterprise Vault. And we'll look at the different extensions that are going to be installed based upon the version of Exchange that you're running. And then we'll go through and look at what your Outlook Web App or Access interface will look like and how we can customize that with desktop policies. So starting off, we're going to do an Outlook Web Access overview. We're going to talk about the different supported configurations that are associated with Enterprise Vault and the different features that are going to be available based upon which one of the Outlook Web Access clients that you're connecting with. So first thing we want to look at is that there is two separate versions of the Outlook Web Access. We have the Basic and the Premium. The Premium version includes all of the Outlook Web Access features. It's designed for Internet Explorer 6.0 or later if you're running Exchange 2003 or 2007. And for the Exchange 2010 version, which is the Outlook Web App Premium, that works with the Internet Explorer 7.0 or later and other browsers. Now, for the basic version, it's a subset of the features that you have available when you're using the Outlook Web Access Premium, and it's designed to work in browsers that support HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, version 3.2, and the European Computer Manufacturer Association script standards. So this is a more generic version that isn't specifically designed for interacting with Enterprise Vault and specific web browser versions. So we're going to look at the functionality. When we go through and are configuring your Outlook Web Access client from Enterprise Vault, we can base what you see based upon whether you're using the Outlook Web Access Premium or Basic client. So we get that ability to configure that. And later in the lesson, we'll be showing you where in the desktop policy you can choose different settings that would be unique for the Basic versus the Premium client. Now, the actual functionality that's going to be provided by Enterprise Vault in an Outlook Web Access client includes the ability to be able to view your items, reply to, forward. If you're using shortcuts, or if you're not using shortcuts, you can use the Archive Explorer to do that. You can restore items with either buttons or menu options. You can set some of the restore properties that we saw in the earlier lesson in Outlook. You can delete your shortcuts or archived items using either the Enterprise Vault delete button or the Outlook Web Access delete button, and we'll show you the different functionality that is associated based upon which button you use. You will have the integrated search button, and if you are using the public folder infrastructure, you will be able to access that as well in your Outlook Web Access from Enterprise Vault. So the next thing we want to look at are the Outlook Web Access configurations that we do support for Enterprise Vault. We support Outlook Web Access on a 2003 Exchange server with a front-end Exchange server and back-end Exchange server, or in an environment that has only a back-end Exchange server. If we're talking about Outlook Web Access for 2007 and 2010, we do support a separate client access server, which is abbreviated CAS, and a mailbox role server, so those are on two separate physical servers. You can combine the client access server and the mailbox server on a single physical server, and you also have the option of having the combined client access server and mailbox server on one physical server, but then having additional physical servers that are also providing the mailbox role server. And we support all those environments, and as we go through this lesson, we'll show you the differences and mention some nuanced changes when you are in these different configurations. And then we can actually find ourselves in a mixed environment where we still have the Exchange 2003, 2007, and 2010 all working together. And this is typically or hopefully only in your environment for a short period of time while you are performing a upgrade. For the Outlook Web Access configuration, first we're going to show you a graphic that is representing the Outlook Web Access 2003 environment with both a front-end and back-end server. The client browser will connect to the front-end Exchange server using basic authentication over the secured sockets layer. The front-end Exchange servers will then determine where the back-end Exchange servers are and what your accounts that are available through the global catalog server. So you want to have a global catalog server typically available to that front-end Exchange 2003 server. The actual communication between the front-end Exchange server and the back-end Exchange server is going to use the Integrated Windows Authentication, or IWA, to verify who you are. And then the back-end Exchange servers will specify or communicate with the Enterprise Vault servers using the anonymous access. And in our earlier mailbox archiving lessons, we recommended that you associate Enterprise Vault servers with specific Exchange servers and specific Vault stores. So here we're showing you an example of where we have a one-to-one relationship, but that's not a requirement. We could actually have both of those back-end Exchange servers communicating with the same Enterprise Vault server. Now, with this anonymous access by default, typically the Exchange environment communicates using the anonymous IUSR_computer name account, but we're actually going to go through and create a custom account that we're going to use to allow that anonymous access connection between the back-end Exchange servers and our Enterprise Vault servers. The next configuration that we support was having the Outlook Web Access 2003 using only Exchange 2003 back-end servers. Now, in this particular configuration, the client browser will typically communicate either using the basic authentication or the integrated Windows authentication to those back-end Exchange servers. Once again, the back-end Exchange servers will have to authenticate and determine your mailboxes based upon having access to a global catalog server, and we'll use that same anonymous access between the back-end Exchange servers and your Enterprise Vault servers. And again, we will be configuring that unique account in this environment. Now, if we're talking about Outlook Web Access for a 2007 Exchange servers or the Outlook Web App for your Exchange 2010 servers, here we're showing you an example of the configuration where we have a separate client access server and we have a separate Exchange mailbox server. Now, the separate client access Exchange server is where we are going to be installing our Outlook Web Access extensions on that particular server. We will be revisiting for the Exchange 2003 environment which servers are going to get the Outlook Web Access extensions. And then what will happen is that there will be a communication to the Exchange server, mailbox server, which is on a separate physical server represented in the diagram. Now, what this diagram is showing you as well is that that client access server will still communicate with the Enterprise Vault server using an anonymous access. And again, we will be creating an account that will do that communication. But also, we're trying to show you here that there are certain functionalities in Enterprise Vault, such as using the browser search or the Archive Explorer, that need to be able to communicate directly with the Enterprise Vault server. And they will be communicating using a separate type of authentication directly and be using the Enterprise Vault web app. This is showing you a diagram that can include a combination environment where you have both the Enterprise Vault server communicating with a client access server that's communicating with a Exchange mailbox server role. It will be the responsibility of the Exchange server client access server to communicate with that Exchange 2003 backend server. Again, the Exchange 2003 environment didn't have the concept of that communication, so therefore that client access server needs to act as a front-end server for that back-end server. We will still be using anonymous connections between the client access server for the Exchange 2007 or 2010 environment and an anonymous connection for the back-end server for your Exchange 2003 environment. And again, we're still showing you that there may be the necessity to have some direct connections between the client browser and the Enterprise Vault server for the browser search and Archive Explorer requests. So now we're going to go through, and being we have seen the different types of Exchange and Outlook Web Access environments that our Enterprise Vault is going to support, let's go through and look at how we're going to install the Outlook Web Access extensions. And we're going to start off just considering a 2003 Exchange environment. So first, when we talk about the Outlook Web Access environment for a Exchange 2003 environment, we're going to look at having a front-end Exchange server and a back-end Exchange server. So I have my client browser typically connect using the basic authentication process, which is in plain text, but we're going to provide the security by doing that over a secured sockets layer, which will provide us with the encryption. The front-end Exchange server will then make a lightweight directory access protocol request to a domain controller / global catalog server. Again, you can have a global catalog server on the domain controller, but you need to be able to communicate with both a global catalog server and a domain controller to determine the back-end Exchange server that's actually containing the mailbox that this client is trying to connect to. So there will be a response, a lightweight directory access protocol response, that will tell me the back-end Exchange server that hosts the mailbox database for this particular client. So then the front-end Exchange server will then, using basic or integrated Windows authentication, and more commonly from the front end to the back end is the integrated Windows authentication, to communicate with the back-end Exchange server. And this all has to happen using a proxy application to forward that request from the front-end Exchange server to the back-end Exchange server. And we'll talk a little bit more about that proxy functionality here in just a moment. So as we were mentioning, the authentication process that occurs as part of the Outlook Web Access 2003, the Enterprise Vault is going to use the Windows Integrated Authentication through the Win HTTP calls. The Windows Integrated Authentication is not permitted between untrusted hosts. So that's why if I'm going from a Enterprise Vault server to that back-end Exchange server, I can't use the Windows Integrated Authentication. I have to use the anonymous. So therefore, if I'm using the Windows Integrated Authentication to enable the connection from the front end to back end, I'm going to use a utility called proxy config, which is proxy CFG, and that will be used to add the Enterprise Vault servers to the proxy bypass list on the Exchange server's back-end servers. When you are using the proxy config utility, you will specify the names of the Enterprise Vault servers and the name of the Enterprise Vault site. You'll actually use the DNS aliases for that connection. We're going to look at how we can retrieve items with Enterprise Vault if we have it configured for an Outlook Web Access 2003 environment. So the first thing that happens is that the client makes a request to retrieve an item so that they can preview it in Outlook Web Access. So that request is made via the basic authentication method over the secured sockets layer to the front-end Exchange server. The front-end Exchange server then, using that proxy bypass list, will use the integrated Windows authentication to communicate with the back-end Exchange server. The back-end Exchange server will use that anonymous account to communicate and make a call to an active server page. That active server page name is restore02k.asp. That particular active server page makes the request to the service on the Enterprise Vault server, which is the storage service, to actually retrieve that item. When it retrieves that item, it will restore that particular item back to the back-end Exchange server in that user's mailbox into the deleted items folder. Then what will happen is that the Outlook Web Access process will then render that particular item from the deleted items folder to the end user so that they can then view that item. Now, when the user closes that particular item that they've opened up or retrieved from the Enterprise Vault, it'll immediately be deleted from the deleted items folder on the back-end Exchange server. So now, seeing the process that basically the Outlook Web Access 2003 uses and how it retrieves items for once they've been archived, where would I have to install the Enterprise Vault Outlook add-ins? Well, I'm going to have to install the Outlook Web Access 2003 extensions on both the front end and back end. So I'll install the front end extensions on the front end server and the back-end extensions on each back-end server. So to install these servers on the Exchange servers, what types of software do I have to have available? I have to make sure that on the Windows 2008 Exchange servers that I've gone through the IIS, which is the Internet Information Services role, and I've gone to the feature delegation section and make sure that it has been configured to support both read and write. By default, feature delegation is only set up for reading, for the IP4 address and domain restrictions. And then on the Exchange server, you must be running at least Exchange Server 2003 Service Pack 1 or later, on a Windows 2003 Service Pack 2 or later, and you need to make sure that the Microsoft XML feature is installed, and it is installed by default if you have Internet Explorer 6.0 or later. On the actual clients themselves, you need to use Internet Explorer 6 or later to support the full functionality available to the Outlook Web Access clients. So now we're going to look at the basic process that we go through in order to configure the Exchange servers once we've installed, or as part of the process of installing the Outlook Web Access extensions. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our Enterprise Vault server. We're going to create a file named evservice.txt. We do actually have a script, the makeevservice.txt.wsf file, that'll automatically generate that for you. However, you do not have to use that script. You can manually do it just by entering the IP address of all the Enterprise Vault servers. Then on the back-end Exchange servers, you will copy that evservice.txt file and the back-end extensions and Windows installer file to the back-end Exchange server. And then on the front-end Exchange server, you'll install the front-end Exchange server installation file. Then you'll actually run on the back-end the correct installation folder to install the Outlook Web Access extensions. Then you'll go through on the Enterprise Vault server and create a file named exchangeservice.txt, and this will list the IP addresses of all the back-end Exchange servers in your environment. You then create a user account, and again, you can name this user account anything that you want. You will then run a script to configure certain settings for that anonymous connection. You then need to restart the Enterprise Vault admin service, and then you need to synchronize all of your mailboxes. Now, a little bit more detail about that script that you need to run after you've created the anonymous user account. The syntax of that script is to call cscript. That basically allows you from a command prompt environment to tell the command prompt environment that you're running a Windows script. You specify the name of the script, which is the OWA user.wsf file. You then specify the name of the domain for which the back-end Exchange server exists in. You specify the name of the user account that you created for the anonymous connection, and then you specify the password for that particular account. And then what's going to happen is that that script will configure the anonymous user account in the registry on the Exchange server. It'll create the EV Anon virtual directory, and it will use the list of IP addresses in exchangeservice.txt to populate the allowed IP addresses for the EV Anon virtual directory connected to the anonymous user. So all that's done is part of that script. So now that we have an environment that had the Exchange 2003 and using Outlook Web Access for Exchange 2003 configured and set up, we're going to go and look at what would happen if we didn't have Exchange 2003, but we had a Exchange 2007 or Exchange 2010 environment for setting up Outlook Web Access. So the first thing is looking at the Outlook Web Access extensions for the Exchange 2003 or 2010. We do have one configuration that is supported, which is the Exchange server, client access, and mailbox server role on a single physical server. And in that particular case here, you will install the Enterprise Vault Outlook Web Access extensions on that server. If you do have a separation between the Outlook Web Access on the client access server and the mailbox role on two separate physical servers, then you install the Enterprise Vault Outlook Web Access extensions on the client access server. How does the Outlook Web Access work? On or in a Outlook Web Access 2007 and 2010 environment? Well, what we do is we actually use a ActiveServerPage.net HTTP module. And we add an additional module in, which is shown by the yellow HTTP module in the little diagram there in the lower right. All incoming calls will be passed through this HTTP module. It looks at every single request for the items that are being either archived or retrieved for Outlook Web Access using Enterprise Vault. It handles these requests and it stops the Outlook Web Access handler from running to determine whether or not a particular filter has to be applied. And you can set up response filters to add elements such as the Enterprise Vault toolbar and button icons and shortcuts to the HTML or the active server page rendering of that particular document. And the interactions can occur directly between the Outlook Web Access client and the Enterprise Vault server. And when it does, then in that particular case there, for example, if you're using the Archive Explorer or the browser search, it makes calls to the view message.asp active server page to get that to work. If we're going to retrieve items that have been archived in Outlook Web Access for 2007 and 2010, it is subtly different. It is subtly different than the way that we did it for the Outlook Web Access 2003 environment. We still start off with the client browser making a basic call with the secured sockets layer to the client access server on the front end. And that client access server will then proxy that to the Exchange mailbox server role. But we won't communicate directly as part of the connection to Enterprise Vault from the Exchange mailbox server. We'll basically go straight from the client access server back to that EV Anon virtual directory that was created on the Enterprise Vault server through the Restore O2K page to request to restore the item. As earlier, we will restore that item on the Exchange mailbox server role to the deleted items folder, and then we will render that item back to the Outlook Web Access using the common Outlook Web Access connection. Components that are needed to install on the client access server: you need to run the appropriate Windows installer package, either 32-bit if you are running 32-bit Exchange 2007, or the 64-bit version for 2007 or 2010. And what that does is that creates a dynamic link library file named Symantec.enterprisevault.owa. And it will also create a couple directories. For the dynamic link library file, it creates the Exchange install directory, client access, OWA bin folder. Actually, that folder is already created. It puts that file in that folder. And that's where we're adding that Enterprise Vault module to the ActiveServerPage.net HTTP pipeline. It is going to create a folder for the Enterprise Vault environment, which is installed in the Exchange install directory, client access OWA under Enterprise Vault. It's also going to modify a couple files. One is the web config file. This file is in an XML format, and it contains the application-wide configuration settings, such as the database connection strings and any custom error messages. It will also modify the small icons.xml file. This shows you the icons that are used in the message, and this is the same file used for both the Outlook Web Access Premium and Basic clients. There is a special note here in that if you do have a configuration for your Outlook Web Access 2007 and 2010 environment where you have a client access server and mailbox role on a single server, but also in that same environment you have additional standalone mailbox roles, there will be some additional configuration necessary, and the specific steps for that are going to be contained in the Setting Up Exchange Server Archiving Guide. What components do we need to be able to install in order to install the Outlook Web Access 2010 and 2007 components? You will need to create a domain Enterprise Vault anonymous account, just like we did for Outlook Web Access 2003. You will have to configure the Enterprise Vault servers to accept that anonymous connection from the Exchange client access servers. And the Outlook Web Access client must be able to communicate directly with the Enterprise Vault server, and this is for communications with the Archive Explorer and Search Archives. And if we're going to be doing this, then the Outlook Web Access client has to be able to see the Enterprise Vault server's web application as well as having access to the client access server. And this is called publishing from a Microsoft type of a standpoint. So to do the installation on the Exchange Client Access Server, you run the appropriate Windows installer file. Again, if it's a 2007 Client Access Server, you run the 2007 version of it. If it is the 2010 Client Access Server, you run the 2010 version of it. On the Enterprise Vault server, you will once again create the Exchange servers.txt, and this time it will hold the IP addresses of all the client access servers. Once again, you will run the Outlook Web Access users.wsf file and specify the name of that anonymous account that we created and its password. We will have to restart the Enterprise Vault administration service again, and we will also have to synchronize our mailboxes. And as mentioned previously, when we run the OWA user.wsf script, it will go and apply certain permissions to that anonymous user account. And these permissions include the SE network logon right, the SE interactive logon right, the SE batch logon right, and the SE change notification privilege. So those are the actual commands or rights that you would see configured on the Enterprise Vault server. This is a comparison of the Outlook Web Access 2003 installation process and the Outlook 2007 and 2010. This is just to kind of give you a summary and allow you to compare and contrast the two different installation processes. Next, we want to move on to, once we've got everything set up and configured and the client actually connects using Outlook Web Access for 2003 or 2007 Exchange, or using Outlook Web App for the Exchange 2010 environment. And then we'll also look at how we're going to set that up and customize that using desktop policies. And we're also, in this section, going to introduce a utility or tool that can help you troubleshoot if you're having problems getting the Outlook Web Access environment set up and correctly configured. So first, if you're using Outlook Web Access 2007, we'll look at the different buttons and icons that are available to us. First, we'll look at the toolbar icons. You can see that we have Archive, Restore, Delete, Cancel, and Help, and we will be looking at the desktop policy settings that configure what you see here in the Outlook Web Access. Also, we have on the menu options, if you have it configured to see the Archive Explorer and Search Archives, they will show up under your folder section. And then also we will see the shortcuts if you have been configured to use shortcuts in your Outlook Web Access environment. For 2010 Outlook Web App, and again you can see the title here that the name has changed. It actually says Microsoft Outlook Web App. The shortcuts have changed. Also, if you right-click on a particular shortcut, they are context sensitive. So in this particular example, we had right-clicked on something that had already been archived. So therefore, our options are to restore or delete. If we had clicked on a mail message or right-clicked on a mail message that had not been archived, then you would have a Store in Vault option on the menu. So it's based upon what you have right-clicked on will determine what you actually see in the pop-up menu. And also, you can still see in your Outlook Web App for 2010 the Archive Explorer and Search Archives based upon the Outlook Web App client that you have installed, whether you have Basic or Premium installed. If I'm going to archive items from Outlook Web Access 2007, from the menu options, you'll see I have the Archive option here. And again, if we are using, or we have the ability to use this and using the full client, you can go through and specify certain characteristics about archiving that item, such as the vault that you wish to store it in, and the retention category, as well as if you wish to delete the item after you've stored it, and if you wish to create a shortcut to that item once it has been archived. You do have inside of Outlook Web Access, just like you had inside of Outlook in a previous lesson, the ability to reply forward these items once they have been opened. So this is just to show you that you have that full functionality in the Outlook Web Access environment. And you can disable this functionality inside of Outlook Web Access based upon your desktop policy settings if you decide to do that as well. Next, we want to talk about the concept of deleting items when you're using the Outlook Web Access environment. You can use either the Outlook Web Access Delete, And if you select that, you will be prompted on what you wish to do. Do you delete just the shortcut, or do you delete both the shortcut and the archived item? If you do select delete both, the shortcut and the original item will be deleted from your archive. And we talked a little bit about what happens to that in an earlier lesson for mailbox archiving when you delete items. You can also select the Enterprise Vault delete option. And again, that will prompt you to delete either the item or the shortcut based upon your desktop policy for Outlook Web Access. So how do we configure those desktop settings? We open up the desktop policy again by opening up the property settings, and then we can go to the Advanced tab, and this time we have selected under the list settings from Outlook Web Access. And we're showing you highlighted on both of the different sections of the advanced functionality, the Archive Explorer for the basic and premium. So this is just showing you, as we mentioned earlier in the lesson, that your interface can be based upon the type of Outlook Web Access client that you're connecting to, whether you're using the basic client or the premium client. Again, you can get more details about the individual settings that are configurable here under the Advanced section in the Enterprise Vault Help or in the Administrator's Guide. Last thing we want to look at in this section is a utility that has been created to help you troubleshoot if you're having problems getting your Outlook Web Access environment set up. As we saw when we went through the earlier sections of the lesson, it's very detailed about which version of Exchange you have, which version of Outlook you have. Do you have front end and back end for Exchange 2003? In your 2007 and 2010 Exchange environment, are you using CAS and Mailbox on a single server? Are they separated on two servers? There's all these different things to consider. So therefore, even if you followed all the rules and you're pretty sure everything is configured correctly, you can use this tool just to verify that everything is working. The tool's name is the Enterprise Vault Outlook Web Access Resource Tool. Also, the acronym is EVORT. This is going to go through, and we have the TechNote reference here that gives you the details for where to go and download this tool and how to use the tool. It's going to run on the Enterprise Vault server. You can either run it before or after you've installed the Outlook Web Access extensions. It will check the configuration of both your client access server and the mailbox server, and it will generate a report to tell you what types of problems that may be occurring. It must be run on the Exchange server by someone who has the Exchange server admin role and is also a administrator, is in the administrator's local group on the Exchange server. You run this from the command line utility of evort.exe, and there are different types of switches that you can specify, such as /t to generate a trace log, /d to generate the domain name, or not generate, but specify the domain name that you wish to use as the search functionality, and also the /m. You can run individual modules that are associated with this particular tool. And again, all the details of that are in that tech note to specify specifically all the syntax, which individual modules you can run, and how to analyze the report once it has been produced. In this particular lesson, we looked at how to install and configure the Enterprise Vault Outlook Web Access extensions to enable users to access their archived items from both Outlook Web Access 2003, Outlook Web Access 2007, and the Outlook Web App 2010. In addition, we learned how to customize and check the Outlook Web Access extensions. Our reference materials include the Administration Console Help, as well as the setting up the Exchange Server archiving, the installing configuring guide, the Administrator's Guide, and then we also have the reference to the tech note for the Enterprise Vault Resource Outlook Web Access tool. And this brings us to the end of Lesson 8.